Hello, everybody. So it was great to see a bunch of people talking about exponential growth and a bunch of people talking about how modules are just great without actually having to do an explanation of why modules are great, so I can just skip that whole part of my talk. Hi, everybody. I'm Laurie. I'm the co-founder and chief data officer, which is a really great made-up title at NPM Inc. How many of you in the room use NPM? How many of you were aware, before I just said so, that NPM was a company? See, we have that problem, and we're working on it. So today I'm going to be talking about professional JavaScript. I'm going to cover why the finance industry in particular should care about JavaScript and what NPM is doing to help you out. I should also be clear that I'm going to be talking a lot about this thing that we sell called NPM Enterprise because, well, we sell a thing. It's been in beta for a year, and a month ago it became generally available. But the reason I talk about it so much is because it was built with your needs in mind. We talked to a lot of people, especially, again, in the finance industry, and we built the thing that you kept asking for. So I'm going to be talking a lot about the problems that finance faces, and it would be remiss of me not to mention the fact that we've solved those problems for you. So what do I mean by professional JavaScript? The 4 key points of professional JavaScript, as I've defined it, are security, compliance, collaboration, and control. But before we talk about those things, we have to answer the larger question, the meta question, which is, why should I care? And the reason that you should care is that JavaScript is a huge deal these days. You're at a meetup that has JS in the title, so you probably don't think that's a controversial thing to say, but possibly the Java devs back at your office still do. But even JavaScript developers tend not to realize quite how big JavaScript has become. On a Tuesday like today, the NPM registry will serve 2 billion downloads just today, and by the end of the next 7 days, we'll have done 12 billion downloads. JavaScript is the most popular single programming language in the world by basically any measure that you want to look at. GitHub says it is, Stack Overflow says it is, /Data says it is. And since 95% of the people who use JavaScript are using NPM to do that JavaScript, that means that it's a true statement that all 500 of the Fortune 500 are already using NPM every day. But how did that happen? It's worth figuring out how that happened because it's relevant to this conversation. The way that it happened is developers find open source JavaScript libraries that help them get their jobs done faster. And developers are lazy as hell. So we invented this thing called code reuse, and we called it a best practice because being lazy is a best practice. Going fast is a best practice. So they use open source JavaScript because it makes them get their job done faster. And to do the rest of their job, they write some more JavaScript, and some of that JavaScript is going to be useful again later, so they create more packages, and they publish those packages, and then there's more packages, and people find those, and people use those, and so on and so forth until you've got billions of downloads. In fact, a modern web application, 97% of the code in it is downloaded from NPM. All of the developers that you employ to write JavaScript are writing the last 3% of the code in that application. It's the most important 3%, but it's only 3%, and the other 97% is being downloaded from our servers to the tune of 2 billion packages a day. And you specifically, by which I mean the people who work in finance, are doing more of this than anybody else. We did a survey this year of 33,000 NPM users, and according to those responses, finance is the biggest user of JavaScript of any industry other than tech itself. There are over 30,000 NPM packages in active use by the finance industry. And you're also doing everything with these JavaScript packages. You're not just doing web apps, although we surveyed 2,600 people in the finance industry specifically. 97% of you are writing web apps, but 76% of you are writing JavaScript for servers. 43% of you are writing native apps. Of those 43%, 67% are writing desktop apps, and 77% are writing mobile apps, so lots are writing both. And 11% of you are putting JavaScript on embedded devices. I don't know who in finance is putting JavaScript on embedded devices. Please come talk to me afterwards. I would like to know what that is. But another thing that we pulled out of our survey data is that finance cares more about doing it properly. In fact, it cares more about doing JavaScript properly than any other industry that we surveyed. You test more. You do more security, you do more linting, you do more bundling, you use Webpack more than anybody else, you use frameworks more than anybody else, and you're not demographically different from the other industries. You're not older or more experienced or anything, you just care more. So that's good news, but it's not all good news. We did an analysis of the packages downloaded from the public registry by 8 large banks. Not going to say which 8, no matter how much you twist my arm. In the course of a single month, those 8 banks downloaded 23 million packages from the registry. I don't know why they haven't cached them. And they downloaded 824 packages that contained security vulnerabilities, and 7% of those packages with security vulnerabilities contained critical vulnerabilities. And if you're going to tell me that none of those made it into production, I'm not going to believe you. So the finance industry is putting critical vulnerabilities in JavaScript into production all of the time. So it's great that finance uses lots of JavaScript. You are moving fast, and you're shipping great software, and you're building better quality software than if you tried to build it all yourselves. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but this stuff doesn't come for free. You have to take JavaScript more seriously than you have been taking JavaScript. You have to professionalize your use of JavaScript. And right now, that's not happening. Speaking of which, some of you may have seen this tweet. I don't know if you all have. I'd like to apologize for this tweet, is basically what I'd like to do. It was very early in the morning, I hadn't had my coffee, and somebody was threatening legal action for something that was not my fault. So I was understandably grumpy. How many of you in the room are familiar with a website called Hacker News? Right, so it went to the top of Hacker News that day, which was not great. I was not hoping to be like calling out a bank. But I will say, in my defense, if one of your developers accidentally publishes your code to our servers, we didn't steal that code. You gave it to us. And if it takes you 3 years to notice that that happened, the people being irresponsible are, again, not us. But really, the tragic thing about this is that the only thing that was unusual about this incident is that I was grumpy and tweeted about it. This happens every week. Every week we find yet more like private IP that absolutely shouldn't have been on the registry that somebody's freaking out about, and they're like, take it down, and I'm like, there are millions of mirrors of the registry. All of your code is already in China. If you have put secrets into this package, you have to change the secrets. Deleting the package will not fix this. But the good news here is that there's no reason for this to happen. We already make and we already sell a thing that would have prevented that happening and also prevented all of those security vulnerabilities that I was talking about from making their way into production apps. And I'm going to talk about it in a bit, but first let's get back to what I started talking about, which was professional JavaScript. JavaScript is a different beast from the programming languages that came before it. It uses a lot more modules because those modules are a lot smaller. It's not better, it's not worse, it's just different. So other languages just have a handful of dependencies, and existing security processes were built to take that into account. So you might have things like whitelists or blacklists to manage which dependencies are allowed into your projects. You might even be reasonably expected to fill in a form and ask a human before you use a new library. And you might even believe that your team would find the time to review the code of an open source package before it started using it in production, although even with the old languages, that was kind of a stretch. None of that is going to work in JavaScript. You're going to be using 2,000 packages in a single application. You're going to be using 20 or 30,000 packages across your entire organization. There is no way that you are going to manually do that stuff. You can't inspect them all. You can't even pretend that you're inspecting them all. Just filling in the forms would take a month. And you ship hundreds of times a day because everyone's using continuous integration and continuous deployment, right? So there can't be a manual anything, and you can't just ignore the processes and hope that nobody notices, which is the de facto solution a lot of people have landed on. You have to throw out the broken processes and come up with stuff that works natively for JavaScript. You have to come up with JavaScript best practices. To keep up with the pace of continuous deployment, you will have to also adopt continuous security. NPM automatically runs a security scan every time you run npm install. You may have seen those notices. With npm Enterprise, you can get those for all of your devs. So instead of a big security fire at the end of your sprint when you discover that something is bad, you can fix things as you go while people are putting the software together. npm Enterprise also has the best feed of JavaScript vulnerabilities in the industry. Features like blacklists assume that your security team or your IT department are going to hear about a security vulnerability before anybody else does, so that you can you can save the day by putting it into a blacklist. But there is absolutely no chance that you're going to hear about a security vulnerability before we do, because we have 11 million developers using NPM, and there is a report vulnerability button on every single package page. So we absolutely always hear about security vulnerabilities before anybody else does, because there are thousands of people mashing the button to tell us about it. And if you build with NPM Enterprise, you can run audits on your builds, and you can configure your builds to fail if they find vulnerabilities of a specified severity. So you can treat security scans just as part of your test suite. You can say, okay, all of the tests pass except the one with the security, so back to development, we're going to fix those dependencies and it's fine. All of this can happen on each and every build silently and quickly and transparently without interrupting anybody's day. And speaking of continuous integration, how many of you who are using NPM are using NPM 6? All right, for those of you who are not using NPM 6, you can upgrade to NPM 6, and it is 25 times faster than the previous versions of NPM. You're welcome. And if you are using NPM in a continuous integration environment, you can use the npm CI command, which is exactly like the npm install command. It's only twice as fast, because it assumes that it's running in CI, and it can make some assumptions about that environment. The story with compliance in JavaScript is another story of abandoning the old ways. With 30,000 packages, you just do not have the internal resources to be doing this stuff yourself. You would have to create lists of viable licenses. You would have to pay lawyers to interpret those licenses. And the situation is often foggy anyway, because what is the license of an open source package? Is it the thing they put in the package JSON? Is it the thing they put in the license.txt? What if that conflicts with a bit of copy-pasted code that's somewhere deep inside of the module? What even is the license of this piece of code is a complicated question that must be answered by lawyers, and you don't want to have to do that 30,000 times. You can't do that 30,000 times. So let us do it for you. We are going to put together a consortium of banks. We are going to do the work, and then we are going to give you access to that list of packages that are already sorted and made and classified according to their licenses, so that you don't have to. I talked earlier about the feedback loop that is propelling JavaScript to the stars. The reason that I said it is relevant to us in this conversation here is because the same feedback loop can be used to power productivity inside of your organization. A decade ago, your company, or even 5 years ago, your company probably employed just a handful of people who were writing a little bit of jQuery in one corner of the room, and you weren't spending a lot of time thinking about what they were up to. But now, lots of companies are employing hundreds of people who do nothing but write JavaScript all day. And they're probably writing quite similar things over and over. So they're going to want to use that feedback loop. They're going to be able to want to find packages that people have already written inside of the company. They're going to want to be able to reuse that code easily, and they want to be able to publish their own stuff internally. And that is what NPM Enterprise does. You get your own website, just looks exactly like npmjs.com. You can see the new packages as they're published by far-flung colleagues all over the world. And you can create organizations. So you can publish some things that are available to everyone in your company, and some things that are private, just to your little organization, those little secrets you don't want other people to see, or stuff that you don't want other people using yet. This is the thing that would have prevented that unfortunate tweet that I put up earlier. Because once you're using NPM Enterprise, attempts to publish to anywhere other than attempts to publish your code to the public registry would fail, because it would recognize that you're not publishing to the registry where you're supposed to go. Just like the NPM website, NPM Enterprise will give you the full text search of all of the public packages, as well as all of the internal packages that you've published. Every package gets its own page with a full README, so you don't have to build your own documentation site, which you've never got around to anyway. Package pages will also show you their dependents, so you can tell who else in your company is using this package that you've published, which is very useful when you need to have a conversation about how important it is, or whether your little department is providing any value. And when your devs find code they want to use, they can just install it, just like any other package. They don't have to have a meeting. They don't have to coordinate release cycles. You don't have to satisfy stakeholders, whatever that means. You just install the thing and use the thing, just like an NPM package out in the world. And the great thing is, if they release a security patch within your company, you'll get the security patch within your company. And if they release a breaking change within the company, you won't get the breaking change. And that's not like some extra special feature we had to add. That's just how NPM works. And it works just as well outside as it works inside. This kind of stuff is second nature to the open source community, and it can work inside your company just the same way. One fun feature of NPM that not enough people are aware of is initialization packages. Some of you may have heard of create React app. Hands? Right. So create React app can be triggered using npm init. You can just run npm init React app, and you get a React app. But the thing you might not know is that's a convention. So if you publish a package called mycompany/create app, then people run npm init mycompany app. It will initialize your internal boilerplate. Whatever it is that, whatever best practices you've decided your internal applications should follow will be automatically initialized by npm init for your people every time they run a new app. All of what I've been saying so far sounds pretty great to developers, but it also sounds kind of like letting go. I'm saying stop trying to maintain your own vulnerability database. Stop auditing your licenses one at a time. Take the brakes off of your internal collaboration. This sounds great to developers, but to managers and IT departments, it can sound kind of scary. The problem with most attempts by companies to control what their developers do is that the process is adversarial. A new tool is introduced so that management can tell what is going on, or a security check is put in place that immediately becomes a bottleneck for everybody's process. It slows stuff down, and developers hate it. And even worse than slowing your team down is that the tools that claim to provide control but that your developers hate will be immediately bypassed by your developers because your developers are developers, and they're exactly as smart as the developers who built the tool. So they will sideload banned modules on their home Wi-Fi. They will check in insecure dependencies so that you can't see that they're there. Because they need to get stuff done, and that is a higher priority for them than management being able to see exactly what's going on. NPM Enterprise doesn't have that problem because NPM Enterprise works exactly like NPM does, and developers using NPM all the time was the problem you were trying to solve in the first place. Developers love NPM, and this is like extra NPM. It's more NPM. It's all of the public NPM plus the internal packages from other parts of your company. So the developers are attracted to this, like, flies to honey or whatever it is that flies are most attracted to. I don't know. I'm not going to judge. So what is it that we built into NPM Enterprise that gives you the control? The first and most obvious is single sign-on. There's an enterprise software management tool that shall remain unnamed, but people actually pay money for, where all package publishing is done by logging into a single box and running a command on that box to publish a piece of software to your internal repository. And I'm frankly astonished that anyone puts up with that in a piece of enterprise software. Our single sign-on doesn't work that way. Everybody gets their own username, everybody can publish, and it works with any OIDC provider, which is to say all of the ones that you would expect, so you don't have to be constantly managing your users. And you can sign in straight from the command line. You just do an npm login, you get a browser window, you sign in with Google or whatever else you want to sign in with, and the CLI gets a token behind the scenes, and you don't have to copy and paste credentials around. You also get full visibility of what's going on. Within your company's local NPM community, you can see all of the packages published, all of the users authorized, every invitation sent and accepted, all of the organizations and teams created. It is the visibility you want without getting in their way. And of course, your NPM Enterprise instance runs on its own dedicated hardware inside of Google Cloud. If you need a different cloud, please come talk to us. But it will run in the legal jurisdiction that you need it to run in for whatever regulations you are trying to satisfy, and you can get strong guarantees of network and data isolation. So, to wrap up, JavaScript is super important. You are doing an awful lot of JavaScript, and the data indicates that some of you are taking unnecessary risks to do so. We've been working very hard to make the best tool in the world to do JavaScript professionally, and we would love to help you do more, faster, and more safely. So talk to us at our table tonight or get in touch at these details, and thank you all very much for your attention.